Hello and welcome to today's session. And the session today is about self-sabotage. Okay. So, our biggest goal in this group is to make changes that we can stick with for life. Okay. And I think it's important just remember that whilst a huge amount of the conversation centers around diet and exercise, they're not the full picture. Okay. They're just two important, but just two parts of the process. And in some respects, eating the right things and exercising are probably actually the easy parts, if you think about it, because they are very straightforward, very prescriptive. And it's about doing the same things over and over again, which is where the hard part comes in, which is sticking to it. Now, in one of these sessions a couple of weeks ago, I talked about stress and how stress can have an impact on or make it really difficult for us to stick to our healthy lifestyle. Okay. And you can find that forum on the app. So all of these recordings will be on the app. So if you want to go back and listen to that, you can listen to that one. So stress is one blocker, but today I want to talk about another blocker, and that's self-sabotage. And let's just start by deciding or being clear about what that actually means, because I think of it like this. It's when we get into a good place and make changes that we're not used to. But then we start to feel uncomfortable in this new place and very much outside of our comfort zone. So I just want you to think about, just to bring that to life a little bit more, I just want you to think about maybe, how you felt before you started this program. Maybe you'd struggled with eating for a long time, you'd felt out of control, you'd sort of seen the impact on your health and your weight and didn't feel like you could do anything about it. And that becomes a real source of distress when you can see the impact that something's happening, but you really can't change your behavior. Okay. And that can be a cycle. I was in there for a very long time. But when you start a program like this, it all seems so simple. It's like a light bulb switches on in your brain, and you think, that's it. Yeah, it's so easy. I can do this. You make the changes to your diet. You start going to a gym or doing workouts in your house. And it really doesn't take any time at all until you start to feel a whole lot better. You feel better inside because you're giving yourself what you need, you're taking better care of yourself, you're eating well, you're moving, but also you feel better in your mind because suddenly you get a sense of what it feels like to free yourself of that awful relationship with food that you've struggled with for a long time. And, in the early days, you can really feel like you're on a high. It feels great. Suddenly you get a sense of the fact, what it feels like to not have that awful, relationship with food dragging you down, following you around everywhere. You can do it. You feel like you are doing it. And it's fantastic. It's something that you've wanted for a very long time. What's then really common is for that feeling to start to change. And it's a little bit like, imagine if someone gave you a pair of wings and you were flying, and at first you thought, oh, this is amazing, this is really great. And then suddenly you think, oh my God, what am I doing up here? And the reality sits in and you start to panic and feel like you're falling again. And that can be the same in this situation. There's the exhilaration at the beginning, and then the doubts start to creep in and you get scared. Okay. Now, I'm going to talk about a few different situations that can start to arise quite commonly in this situation. So, we've been flying and suddenly we sort of start to panic. And there might be a few different things here. You might start to think, I've never done this before. I can't do this. You suddenly become frightened that, you'll fail again because you failed so many times. Or you might start to worry about missing your old life. Can I have go and have fish and chips again? Can I not eat chocolate anymore? I won't enjoy going to the pub or going for meals out. What about Christmas? What about birthdays and New Year anniversaries or, holidays? I remember when I gave up drinking, and that was the thing that went through my head quite a lot. Oh my God, I can't even ever have a glass of champagne on my birthday, or if I go to a new year, or if I'm on holiday, and you start to sort of think about all these what ifs and you get frightened about something that's not even happened yet because you're worried that you won't be able to enjoy this special thing because of what you're doing now and today. Okay, so it's a really normal thing. Another thing that you might think is, am I going to become boring? Am I going to be the odd one out of my friends, of my family? You know, will they not want to spend time with me anymore? Will they not enjoy spending time with me? You know, will they think I'm the boring one, or I just need to, you know, they'll reject me in some way for what I'm doing now. And that can be a real fear that comes up for people. We might find ourselves in a stressful situation, okay? And that's where the link with stress and how that can affect your eating can go. But that's uncomfortable and unusual, because normally when we experience stress, we might head into the kitchen and we might eat something and sit there and we distract ourselves from feeling the stress. Even if we just start feeling across with ourselves for eating, at least we're not thinking about the stress. So suddenly we're in that stressful situation and we're not used to experiencing the stress without the food there. And that can feel really uncomfortable. We can feel really exposed in those situations, because suddenly it's just us sat there and our feelings, and nothing in our hands, nothing in our mouths, nothing in our stomach that's distracting from that. Okay. There's another situation that can arise, is a fear of attracting attention. And, some people love being the center of attention. I'm not one of them. And it's funny because these things can be quite deep rooted. I grew up with, I'm the oldest of four children. The second one behind me was a real sort of show person, and she was always in the centre of attention. So I was just very used to being sort of sat in her shadow, and I was very comfortable there. So you can be in a situation where you are starting to lose weight, or you're getting toned or building some nice muscles, and you start to worry that, what will people think about you? You can't hide that anymore. There'll be a point where no one notices, and then there will certainly be a point where people do. And what will they think? What sort of attention will we attract from them? What criticism, will we attract potentially? Will they think, oh, we need to lighten up, relax a bit, stop being so obsessed with your diet? I've heard that so many times. Um, you're going too far, you're too thin, you've done enough now, And sometimes these situations don't even happen. We can just imagine that they will. But we know that something's very physically going to change about us, and we're going to attract attention from people. And we start to worry or create imaginary scenarios in our mind of what those scenarios will be like. And it's interesting when you think about those imaginary scenarios, they're never good. You never have one sat there patting you on the back, telling you how amazing you look and what a great job you've done and how proud they are of you, and keep going. In those, when you're creating those sort of situations, they're always negative, aren't they? Someone's giving you a hard time, or another one that people can find is you worry that what you're doing will make someone else feel uncomfortable. We might make our husbands feel uncomfortable that they're eating things that we're not, or we're getting fitter than they are. And we don't like that. We don't like that comparison. It might be that we feel that, we're making our kids feel uncomfortable, or our best friend, if she doesn't, isn't looking after herself in the same way. That can be something that we are then going into uncharted territory, because we're worried about what people will think of us in those situations. And what's at the root of all these things that I've just talked about is fear of change. And that can be a time that we then the self-sabotage comes in. We don't always realize why we're doing it. We just know that we get to that maybe 3-week point and we struggle with our diet. We've been doing really well, and we suddenly don't know why things are suddenly becoming hard again. But this can be what's happening. We're entering this fear situation. We're worried about carrying on. We're worrying about what success is going to do to us. We're worrying about what changing our body is going to do, in terms of how it's going to change our life, how it's going to change other people's perception of us. There can be another reason as well that is behind self-sabotage, and that is a fear of allowing ourselves to experiencing something so positive. And, and that means feeling really good about ourselves, feeling really proud of what we're doing, feeling that we are truly in control of food for the first time in our lives, and that we don't need it anymore as a comfort blanket. Well, we start to see it as it is, as something that's really kept us stuck. And suddenly we start to feel free, and we start to feel good about that, and we start to feel positive about it. And, all those sound like wonderful things, don't they? Except, and I'm going to say one more thing actually. All those, and another thing that can happen is if we feel like food is holding us back, and it's keeping us stuck. If we're able to let go of that, then what could open up in terms of our lives for us that we might really enjoy, that we might be able to do more and experience more and or travel more or, whatever it is that we want. By letting go of this negative relationship with food and being healthier, fitter, stronger, more confident, suddenly we could open up our lives into something that is absolutely amazing, and really changes things for us, which is phenomenal. When you think about that, you think about how great you feel. Wow, isn't that wonderful? All those amazing things. Except quite often, we then don't feel like we deserve that. We might feel guilty about feeling so great. We might feel guilty about being positive ourselves. We might feel like we'll be neglecting other people if we do things for ourselves, and start to give ourselves a hard time, because I think as women, we can tend to be really hard on ourselves. And rather than patting ourselves on the back and saying, go on, girl, do it, we're actually sort of bringing ourselves down because we're frightened of stepping out of this. I don't know, stepping into our power, maybe stepping out into something where we become a bigger, stronger, more powerful, more, more sort of stronger, powerful, a bit more. God, I'll start again. A stronger and more powerful version of ourselves, but also start to know what we want and know ourselves and know our own mind and be a lot more assertive. That's the word I was looking for. So we start to sabotage ourselves for that because we're more used to bringing ourselves down. That's more familiar to us. And that's the root of this. All these changes, whether it's to do with, that I've talked about before, whether, how other people will view us and what possibilities we're opening up from ourselves from doing this, or how great we're feeling. What we're doing is we're moving out of something that's very comfortable and familiar to us. Even if it's not necessarily nice, it's comfortable and it's familiar. And moving out of that place is hard. It feels scary. It feels daunting. We're not sure what's around the corner. And it's a very natural, common human behavior for us to do that, for us to be on the cusp of breaking out of our old life or our old habits and going into a completely new zone for us, completely uncharted territory, but lose our bottle and shrink back into where we know we're more comfortable. Okay. And we know we're familiar with what the dynamics of what being there is like. Even if we don't like it, it's more comfortable. So, and if we take a step back from this, this situation, when we get into it, tends to be a very emotional state. We don't necessarily realize it's happening. We're not aware of our thought patterns. We just know that we start to struggle, and we know that emotionally it takes its toll on us. Now, if you can actually step outside of that, and look at it from the outside in, as if one of your children was experiencing that, or your best friend, or your husband, or your mother, or someone like that, we would, if they told us about this situation, what would we do? Well, we know what we'd do. We'd be telling them that, oh, don't be daft. That's all rubbish. It's in your mind. Keep doing what you're doing because it's going to be amazing for you. We would be, their biggest cheerleaders. And that's what we need to become for ourselves, our biggest cheerleaders. So how do we stop self-sabotage from happening to us? Well, firstly, hopefully you'll have sort of gained or gleaned from this so far, is that quite often we don't know it's happening. Okay. So firstly, you might have noticed, as I've been going through a list of examples there, some of those things might really resonate with you, and they may be things that you really recognize in yourself. I said I was self-conscious, and something that's probably held me back in the past is not wanting to attract attention from people or having to explain what I'm doing because I don't feel comfortable with that. Or it might be that, you fear change, you fear that you're getting healthier and fitter than your husband and they're getting less healthy and, and you're worried about them, or you're worried that they'll be more aware of it, because they're no longer your partner in crime. So it's about recognizing some of these situations. Okay, so it's about awareness. It's about cultivating our awareness of these things and these little patterns and these little conversations that we have with ourselves and just starting to notice them. That's the first step. Now, one of the things that I talk about quite a lot, and I do quite a lot, as you probably know by now, is journaling. Because if you're just taking a little bit of time on a regular basis to sit and think and notice, I've learned an awful lot when I've been going through difficult periods of trying to stick with my healthy diet and doing self-sabotaging, eating patterns. The way that I've broken out of it or found my way through is by journaling and by reflection and trying to understand what's going on. So I do recommend that, if you think this is something that really genuinely does hold you back, that it can be a really nice practice and a really valuable practice to do, because all we have, the sort of practice, I should say, in terms of just how you let go of self-sabotage behaviours is, firstly, you've got to recognise them. You've got to know that they're happening. You've got to understand what your patterns are and how you behave in those situations. And that can be done through journaling. And then once you're aware of them, we're starting to notice them more often. We're trying to tune into it happening. And again, that's where journaling comes in, because it's something you really probably need to do on a regular basis. Recognizing this as a phenomenon and something that really does hold you back and really will stop your progress, actually, if it's a big problem for you, is really important. And it takes a little bit of work. It takes a bit of practice to cultivate some habits where you take the time out to recognize that it's happening and to notice when it does. And you aren't, you're not trying to change your thinking. I'll just try and talk about it. So say I were sat here today and suddenly I sort of started to, I'd had a good couple of weeks and I suddenly realized that I had a terrible craving for something, and I might just sit back and think, okay, well, that's interesting. What's going on here? And something happened the other day, actually. Lucia did something that really upset me. And I just found myself furiously going into a cupboard and like trying to find some chocolate in her cupboard, actually, ironically, because she always has it. But in that situation, you just suddenly putting the brakes on a little bit and taking a step back and getting some distance from what's going on and looking at it as if you're looking through another person's eyes at that behavior. And you just see it happening and you become aware of it. You're not trying to change it. You're not trying to have a go at yourself. You're not trying to call yourself stupid. You're just saying, okay, you're registering it and you're seeing that happens. Okay. And that's all it takes, because the more you become aware of those behaviors, the more you can spot them happening, then a sort of magic happens, if you like, in the sense of you start to create a little bit of distance from them emotionally. And you don't necessarily have to act on them all the time. You can sit there, you can see that you're feeling stressed, you can recognize that normally you want to eat, but you can make a decision that that's not going to help you in that situation. So you start to become calmer. You're not just reacting and jumping into these patterns. You might worry about going to the next step of your weight loss because you recognize that you worried about that your friends are going to start noticing and give you a hard time or draw attention to you. And you can then maybe sit down with a piece of paper and start to think about what that means to you or why you're worried about it, and maybe what are some solutions that you could have or do that would actually take you into a different place where you could maybe rethink about what's really important to you, why continuing your journey is important to you, what else you've got to benefit, and then maybe even start to question, is what you're imagining true? Because quite often we make these sort of disaster and doom scenarios up in our mind, and really they're nonsense. We don't know that anyone's going to behave like that. And if they do, does it really matter? Is that our problem? Is it their problem? So we can start to apply some rational thinking about that we as intelligent, women are very capable of doing, because if we were sat there counseling our best friend or a colleague through that, that's exactly what we would recommend to them. So we're almost becoming our own therapist in a way. Okay. So I'm not going to go on too much about it, because really what I want to say now is that this isn't something that takes place, that happens overnight. Today, by listening to this, it's just opening your eyes to the idea that self-sabotage is a very common thing. opening your eyes to some of the ways it will manifest itself in a way, some of the patterns that you might notice, which is why I've given you some examples so you can see, what resonates so you become aware of it. And then the next step is doing that journaling and just doing that little bit of a practice just to build up your own awareness and to learn how to spot it. Okay. So because, and I think, like anything, that becomes easier the more you do it, and it becomes more automatic the more often you do it. And I want to say that I think this is just as important as some of the other things that we talk about in the group, like understanding how to change your meals so you're eating more nutrition, more protein, more veg, fewer carbohydrates, etc. It's just as important as doing your meal plans every week or getting your exercise or your steps in. It's as important, because if you keep coming up against these behaviours, you'll have setbacks all the time. You'll take 2 steps forward, you'll have 1 step, you'll take 2 steps back, and then it'll feel like you're putting in that huge amount of effort, but not getting anywhere. And that's where it starts to become heavy. That's where your motivation starts to drop, I should say. And that's when you then start to do the ultimate self-sabotage, is to give up, because you're on the cusp of making a breakthrough, of changing forever. But suddenly you're creating all this conflict in your mind, or all this friction in your life, and it becomes too much for you, and then you stop doing it. Okay. So you have to keep working on your mindset in the same way that you keep working on your meal plans and the food and getting fitter and stronger. You have to keep being aware of your blockers. You have to keep learning to spot them. You have to keep learning to feel the emotions that are coming up and learn to sit with them, and rather than act on them and turn those into self-sabotaging behaviors, you're just observing them. Okay. And the more you do that, the more successful that you will be in the long term. The more you'll be able to let those things have held you back. In a way, you're imagining that they're just like ties binding you to your old life, and we're just trying to snip them off one at a time, so we can just sort of leave some of these destructive behaviors behind and get to somewhere where we feel happier, healthier, stronger, and really free from this awful feeling of not being in control with your food. Okay, so I hope that's been helpful today. I hope that's given you some motivation, actually, or encouragement to get that journal out, to get nothing nicer in my, well, maybe that's an overstatement. Getting a nice new notebook is a great thing. So I highly recommend it. So if you haven't done it so far, I really recommend that you do. And I also think that we're going into a really nice time of year where we all will have a little bit more time over Christmas. So that could be like the perfect time for you to get that journal, start doing some journaling, and become more aware of your blockers, and therefore more successful at moving past them. Okay. Thank you very much for listening. If any of this brings up anything that you'd like to talk about, then my door's always open. Just drop me a line and we can have a chat. All right, take care, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.